This is Moments of Truth, the webcast with and for customer success professionals. I'm your host, Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker, and today I am joined by Rebecca Nerad. Rebecca has spent 20 years advocating for customers in the supply chain industry. As the VP of Customer Success at E2open, she leads a global team of CSMs and engineers responsible for customers leveraging E2open's supply chain channel shaping and logistics solutions. With a focus on a customer-centric culture, Rebecca advises the E2open team on how to drive value and deliver business outcomes. Rebecca has spent most of her career in customer success roles for supply chain software companies such as E2open Technologies and JDA Software. As head of global marketing for Bristlecone, she created an industry-leading supply chain event, curating content with MIT professors and thought leaders. Rebecca loves learning about how digital technologies inspire strategy and influence real change. She's been recognized as a top 100 strategist in customer success and holds an MBA from the University of Vermont. Rebecca, welcome to the program and thanks for making time for me today.
Thanks, Andrew. Pleasure to be here.
So I've been very much looking forward to talking to you about empathy. We're going to talk about empathy, and there's so many angles that we could talk about empathy, but in this case, what we're talking about in particular is this notion of being able to action empathy through CSM self-awareness so that they become more aware of their own personalities and their strengths and their weaknesses and those of their customers so that they can end up communicating with them better, which is a huge part of customer success.
One of the things I love about customer success, as you mentioned, I've been in this space for 20 years, since before we even use the term customer success. And I love coaching and mentoring CSMs as they're coming into this career, which has taken off, right, over the past 5-8 years. And I get a lot of questions around, coaching and how can I be a better CSM, or how can we hire the right CSMs? And of course, we talk about the need for empathy and good communication skills. And there are some, there's great training available for how to go about that, how to be more empathetic, how to have better communication. And I think it's an interesting discussion on what are we born with? What can we coach? How much can we encourage? How much can we grow out of? Right? What's kind of natural for us, or we can all improve. We can all learn to be more empathetic. Yet at the same time, if you just are not, if you're not intuitive or connected at all, that's it might be a hard career path to choose.
For sure, you need to have a high EQ. You need to actually care about something, care about people in this role, right?
Exactly. So over getting my MBA, or just out of curiosity or interest over time, I've participated in different activities like the Myers-Briggs or the Big Five personality profile. And in fact, the first time that it directly impacted me as a CSM, in the past, I was at a company where we did an activity called the Predictive Index. And it was a way of better understanding ourselves and the way that we think. And in fact, we were encouraged not just to look at it as individuals, but with people in our personal lives or our colleagues, and then to think about our customers through this lens. At the time, I had just been assigned a very challenging customer, one who was not really pleased with our solutions and with what they were delivering. And in fact, I had a meeting just the day or two before. We were supposed to use a recent example. And I said, wow, I went into this meeting and the customer, they were just, laying out their challenges. And my approach, I came in and I said, I'll take care of you. I had just been assigned and I'm, very extroverted, don't worry. And the way the customer responded, he just bristled, like he sat back. I could see just not really delighted.
Wasn't buying it.
Yeah, wasn't buying it, right? Yeah. That's exactly it. And so having been through that, then days later, this training, which was teaching us about thinking differently, I realized this person thinks and judges and makes decisions very differently than I do. Mm-hmm. So as a CSM, I then, the lessons that I learned were he needs detail, he needs proof, right? Instead of just sentiment or assurances. And so through my emails, I would then say, here are 3 points, 1, 2, 3. I will respond to you by this date. And of course, it's very important that I followed up by that date, right. What I knew. And it didn't take that much time, but I certainly did have to prove myself, right? Yeah. He was not one who was quick to trust. And so by me proving, by showing detail, by understanding how he would want to receive information, I was able to build trust and build a relationship with him that, of course, as the story goes, the next year at the same event, my VP was in the room and we were just, laughing and getting along well. And the conversation was so smooth. And he said, this is the same guy from last time? And you bet. But it took me thinking about how he wanted the information, right? And then, of course, as a CSM, advocating for what he was frustrated with, what he wanted to see, with the product team or with my company. But it came through that, not because of my way, not because of schmoozing, right? Because of detail and fact.
Well, you have to be good at that, right? Because in everything that we do, even negotiations, right? We're establishing a relationship. Chris Voss who wrote that great book on negotiating, Never Split the Difference. He talks about how we establish relationships, and it's the same thing. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to establish a relationship with our customer, and we can't just assume that our perspective is the way that the customer wants to communicate. So you made that, and it was early on in your career, but you made that misstep. And I think this is something that is going to be it's a valuable lesson for all CSMs, is that you need to ease into that a bit. You need to better understand your customer, right? And that starts with understanding who you are and how you communicate, right? And then that self-awareness will help you kind of ease into that relationship that you're trying to build with a customer, because it is all about trying to achieve that trusted advisor status. And we're not going to get there if we're not communicating in the right way to build that trust.
That's right. And for me, I am ENTJ for anyone who follows the Myers-Briggs typology, and it's not a surprise for anyone who knows me. I've been that profile my whole life, as often happens, right? That sometimes there are certain aspects where we may lean a little bit, toward the middle, and some that are, are very off to the side. In any profile test, I'm always going to be an extrovert. That's not likely to change. And I think for me, right, that I have that confidence, or I walk and I say, oh, I've got this, right? That can be to somebody who thinks very differently, that could come off as false or arrogant. And for me, it's important to have the self-awareness to know that, right? To know that I'm trying to I'm trying to build trust. I'm trying to let them know that I have it under control. But by having this, by thinking about how other people think about things, it helps me be more introspective. It helps me understand more about myself. And that's why I want to talk about this today. It's not that I'm not suggesting that we should use these models to select for hiring. In fact, there was just a documentary that came out on HBO called Persona, The Dark Truth Behind Personality Types. And interesting because it shows about how it's used in how this kind of profiling can be used to select, companies do on who they should hire for certain roles. So it can be very sensitive, Andrew, because of some of the tests, which were made by old white guys, can be,
very,
or racist or ableist. in ways that we need to be aware of. So I am not saying that they're perfect, that right, that we should rely on them exclusively. Yet
it's just a point. It's a piece of information.
That's exactly it. And
I'm
it helps.
I'm going to check that out. That sounds interesting. I could say in the social media companies, you're abusing the hell out of that. So, that persona, that profile. It's funny. I was smiling because I'm an ENTJ as well. And my first job out of college, I landed a job working for Apple Computer. And when I got there about 2 weeks in, my manager, the hiring manager, called me into her office and she says, "Andrew, listen, you can be so arrogant, but you know your stuff. So I need you to dial it back." So very early in my career, I had and I did know my stuff. I was very confident, but I luckily had some leadership that said easy, and definitely helped position who I am. So, but yes, it is. I agree with you. It's a critical component of being good at what we do, right?
That's just it. And the tool set, again, whichever one you want to use, I mean, typology, it's a tool to be able to see the things that you might not otherwise see, to think about yourself and to think about your teammates too, and the way that they may think about, and of course, the discussion for today about your customers. And I think when you look through any of these, online tools like 16 personalities that make it, they kind of categorize and make it an easy way to reflect and think about yourself. I think it's nice because if you're being self-reflective, if you're thinking about, wow, that's true that I do that. And I think people sometimes are surprised because you initially want to say, you can't just, some little quiz isn't going to put me in a little,
analyze me, right? Exactly.
Of 16 different groups. But then if you go and you read it with an open mind, you may realize actually that's something that I should be aware of. That's something I should, and again, it doesn't mean it's going to dictate how you make all your choices. I think what's interesting, if we're both ENTJs, and yet we're talking today about empathy. So if you look just at the profile of, of an ENTJ, it would say that we use rationality ahead of feeling, right? Because it's not the F profile. And so I think that's something we need to be aware of as leaders, that there are times when I make a decision that if you didn't know me, like the way I describe the way I make a decision may come off as cold, right? Because I will use rationality and logic to make my decisions. But just because I make my decisions with logic doesn't mean that I'm not using empathy. In fact, I would say make decisions with logic, but take action with empathy, right? In fact, the awareness of how other people would react or how the situation might influence them makes me more informed in the way that I make.
Exactly. I was just going to say, I mean, being empathetic is part of the rationalization that I don't think of it because you remember empathy. There's empathy and there's sympathy, right? And I think people mix those things up, right? Are you being empathetic if you say no and somebody thinks that sounds cold? Well, you may have very well been empathetic, which is what you should have been doing in order to make a rational decision. You don't want you want to divorce the empathy from the feeling part of it, right? You got to take that out of you got to take the feelings out of your decision making. I've always talked about that with my direct reports and with my teams, that you've got to remove the emotion. And it's not just with managing your team. You have to remove the emotion when you're dealing with your customers, right? But that doesn't mean that you remove the empathy.
Right. And I think that's the balance, though. And again, that's why there's nuance when we look in these personality profile formats, right? That again, just because I don't make decisions based on feelings, right? I'm not F, that mean that again, that I don't use empathy. So,
and I'm right on the edge, you know, because I was right on the edge of F, but I leaned over towards the more rational side. Now, I mean, you don't have to get in, you also don't have to do, you know, take really complex tests either. I mean, it's something that we teach in our training is one of our exercises is empathy mapping. When we provide a canvas for it, and it's really just, and you can do that for yourself and you can do that for your customers to try and, you're never going to know exactly how your customer feels until you try stuff, right? And so at least you can start to paint a picture of that individual, and then when you speak with them, then you modify, right? But you don't go in guns a-blazing. I'm going to be your hero, right? You go in kind of more, let's figure out how we're going to work effectively together.
I was talking with a new CSM on my team who is planning for a monthly operational review where she'll share metrics with the customer. And she was planning on going in and saying, here it is, here I'm sharing. And just by talking about how the customer wants to receive the information, how they'll think about it, she realized that she'll share, right, here's what we typically show customers, you know, like you. Here's the type of information that's typically useful, right? Because she's kind of initiating this.
It's the beginning of the relationship, right?
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And
right.
But for her approach to be one of curiosity, which is one of the biggest things I coach, right?
Yeah.
To say, you know, is this data useful to you? How might we make it more useful? What else could we find? Yeah. Right? Because there are some of the typical usage, you know, adoption metrics that we look at as CSMs. But for every solution, you know, there can be, you know, some that make, you know,
I may not care.
Customers, yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I may not care, right? And it's not about what you want to show me; it's about what I want to see as the customer, right?
That's exactly it. And I would recommend any time where you're, and in this example, you're introducing a new CSM. Sometimes you're transitioning from one CSM to another. Sometimes it's a customer where, for whatever reason, they haven't had a CSM. It may be a newer program, or it may be they have recently onboarded. You know, there are different reasons, right. But use any of those opportunities as an opportunity, as the chance to learn what matters to the customer. Even though a CSM, you know, a former CSM may have done something a certain way, may have been sending, you know, a dashboard every month, or, you know, or even if it's sent via the system, take the opportunity to engage with the customer and see what's meaningful and useful to them.
Well, take the opportunity to engage with the customer, period. Right? Even if you know that you're getting value, ask the customer, are they getting value? Even if you know that, you know, your teams are killing it and they're you know, adoption is growing, ask them, right? Even if you know that this is the type of information because you got handed off from another CSM, let's validate, right? It's that, I love that. Always be curious. ABC. We actually we use that in training as well. Always be curious. Always be listening. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We need to listen twice as much as we speak.
And I think it's important, again, if the conversation is skills that we're looking for, that we want to encourage and build in CSMs, curiosity is an important one. It's the willingness that you may not know everything about your solution. You may not know if what they're suggesting, can you actually report the data on that? Or can the solution do that? You may not know, but you need to be comfortable with having the conversation and listening, so that you can convey that back, right? And of course, get the information to be able to follow up on the response. But it's the willingness to have that conversation and listen and understand.
Yeah, active listening, key skill, right? These are all these tools, the empathy map, the active listening, 5 whys. These are all they're tools meant to help you better understand and better listen to your customers. So we talk about all of this, all of these tools, all these approaches, these techniques, these important skills for connecting with our customers. But the other thing I don't want people to forget is that we should be thinking about using these same tools when we're connecting with people inside of our organization that we partner up with in order to help the customer become successful. It's just as important. We need to have really great relationships, cross-functionally. I've been saying this a lot. It's customer success. We have the high EQ. We need to be the ones that initiate that. We need to be the ones that make that first move, because we're the most natural people to be able to do that. So don't expect them to have the high EQ and initiate that.
I think early on in one's career, it's easy to say, I'm good at this role, so the other people who would be good at this role would have a similar personality type to me. I'm an extrovert, and so I would think that other CSMs would also, hey, because you want to connect with people, right? But I have seen, and in fact, if you look across the board, there are CSMs who fall in either introvert or extrovert, right? That's only a fragment of the way that we think and the way that we handle people. So it's natural and easy to say what I do, or this is the way to do things, or somebody who thinks like me. And look, you're going to always see that people who have a similar profile, a similar way of viewing are going to naturally connect and get along easily and help share, because the way that they are teaching or learning may be similar. But I think as you grow, and certainly in my case, in my career, I've learned to appreciate much more those people who have a very different profile than mine. Whereas I may be a communicative leader, it really helps me to have someone on my team, or for me to have a right-hand guy who's detail process oriented, who wants to document and all that out, right? Because that's less my style. And so together, I would work well with folks who do that. And for me to know, again, my strengths, and then where, to build the team around me, those people are more likely to have, a very different profile.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
One of the activities I did recently, so every other week, we'll have a meeting that's a group of CSMs, not the entire global call that I host, but kind of a separate, smaller group of one individual team. And I like to do, since COVID, since we no longer can get together in person, since people are in their homes and not connecting in the office. And by the way, my global team, we've been more than half remote since before the pandemic began, right? It's a role that I'm pleased that in many cases you can do remotely. But since then, we've, as a way of reaching out, as a way of connecting with the team, we've done more get to know you activities. So imagine taking 20 minutes at the beginning of an hour-long call, and people submit their answers ahead of time in a get to know you. It's a nice way just for team building and connecting. So an example I'll give is, if you had a superhero power, what would it be? Something like that, right? And so everybody submits maybe a photo or a picture, and then somebody organizes that together in a deck. So
I love that. Get to know each other on a personal level. Once again, it's something that we want to do sometimes with some of our larger customers as well, right? It's about establishing that relationship, that connection with people.
And there are a lot of questions that it's nice to know and think that way about your teammates and what they end up sharing and revealing. Is another one that I did was like your spirit animal, right? If you were an animal, what would that be? And so everybody sent a picture. And then it just takes a moment to talk about that. And of course, so funny for me to see someone who is one of the most diligent, hardworking people on the team. She submitted an ant. Andrew, I couldn't tell you how many animals I would put forth before I would put an ant, but it's so true of her, right? Working together with a team, not wanting, to be,
not wanting to be on the line
as a hard worker, but not to stand out anymore. And it was really revealing. And someone showed a lone wolf, and it was funny. Someone was like, I really don't know. And they did an online quiz for what animal they would be. I took the same quiz, and by the way, it was the animal that I already chosen for myself. So
what was it?
lion. I say lioness, but like it's lion all day long. No shock, right?
That's no shock.
So the activity I did was about a month ago, and it was, what is your personality profile? How does this help you as a CSM? Obviously, knowing that people would have, all sorts of different profiles, but that could, that would lean into how those skills are helpful. And that's actually what brought me to this conversation today, was the feedback, how much everybody really enjoyed doing this activity, right? We've done this sort of thing with various teams over the past year. So it's not unique in that there's a little get to know you activity. Not even unique in that they're starting to think about themselves, right? Because my other examples did something similar, but something about looking at the strengths, weaknesses, your personality profile. A lot of CSMs went and asked their children or their spouse, or wanted to learn more and think about what others were, right? There was one team that we did this with, and so they said, can we ask that team? And can we, right? And so kind of building and looking across other teams, and of course, again, how they use these as a CSM. And the part that I was surprised by, I knew we would have different styles of people, right? Introverts, extroverts, and different strengths. But the way that their category, some of the categories come together, that there's a style, called diplomat, right? Which is intuitive and feeling, that 70% of my CSMs fell into that category. And I know it's statistically insignificant as far as a global CSM assessment, right? But it was really interesting how many fell into these similar profiles, which makes sense though, right? Because
it does
empathy, idealism, right? And
self-awareness. These are all,
exactly. And that's not to say, right, if you're, an explorer, like an SP personality, that's not to say that you wouldn't make a good CSM, right? But it does mean, the more that you would learn about, and those personality profiles, for example, are very spontaneous, right? And so if you say, well, what do I need to work on, right? If I'm an explorer and I want to be successful as a CSM, the weaknesses there might be that, do you procrastinate? Are you disorganized? So it kind of helps you, or it helps you thinking more about what could you work on, what strengths might you want to consider. And that applies to any job, to any.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think is interesting is that, and I experienced this when I was at Business Objects, right? And this is pre-CSM, this is the services days. But when we did the Myers-Briggs profile, and we're talking a very technical, it's a very technical platform. Our services team all grouped around that, and I forget what this, but they were all in this group. And then there were these 2 points on the opposite end of the spectrum. And one of those was me. And the other one was the guy that worked with me as my technical SE. And we had a great relationship, but it was really funny because you could see just how much they grouped and how much we were outliers. But I think what you depending on what your solution is, you're going to see groupings. If you're being aware of who you're hiring, I could see a different personality type for a more homogeneous application versus one that's a platform where if you have 300 customers, you have 300 different implementations.
That's very true. That's I've spoken about that at a prior event when I was talking about segmenting customers, right? And how do you scale, right? The difference of the personality and the strengths that you need.
Yeah.
When you have, more enterprise strategic customers who are on much more custom solution, and you need more of a cowboy mentality that it's okay if you don't have, if you can't be prescriptive about next steps because you need somebody who can, take that on.
Because it's a bespoke, there's something that's going to be unique and you're dealing with more technical folks or what have you.
Exactly. Versus if you have someone who has 100 customers assigned to them and you have playbooks that actually you can align exactly what should be followed in what cases, that personality would be more of a soldier personality.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Able to execute those.
March to this tune right here. We've got it all laid out for you. Going to manufacture success. So
I reached out.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I reached out to a former colleague of mine who is very, very process oriented. So CS operations, right?
Yep.
He's excellent at, prescribing what those processes are. And he is very introverted. In fact, when we used to work together, I would encourage him to reach out. He could be in the same room as somebody and he'd rather walk away and send them an email.
Yeah.
And so we would talk through that. And so I reached out to him, after I started gathering more info and just kind of getting a kick out of this idea again. And where his profile fell, right, of logistician, as it's called, it just made sense again, right? That somebody who's, practical and order, and he's just, great at, so I think it's just an interesting, again, way of approaching strengths and how to leverage them. But also what we need to be aware of, right? Like I said, if he was a CSM, he needs to work on connecting and putting himself out there.
It's the science. It's the science to it. There's science to this. I'm a huge fan of empathy and EQ, and I overemphasize when I'm training people how important it is to empathize, to think like a customer whenever possible. Like I mentioned, we use the empathy map tools, and I love the activities. I love that, because that's kind of, you're doing that. You want to do that with your customer. It's not, what's your sign type of things, but you're doing something similar, trying to understand somebody at a different level. We're trying to establish a relationship. So I love all that. I want to take kind of a turn here. I want to talk about something that you mentioned there before we wrap up, about the remoteness of this role, about supporting remote customer success, because I think with tools like what we're on right now, like Zoom, where we can see each other and we can really look in each other's eyes and have a conversation, that telepresence type of tools like this, as well as Slack and all the other technology that we now have available to us, really opens up the floodgates of being able to hire really competent customer success folks pretty much anywhere.
I have worked from home for 17 years. I live in Vermont. I love it. I choose to live here. And the big change for me over the past year has been that I'm not traveling anymore. I usually travel 25, 30% globally. And I have felt as connected in some ways over the past year, and in particular in our customer success community, by being able to connect online, but with our customers as well, especially as the shift has been to move more toward video and meetings such as this. We use Zoom and Microsoft Teams. It's amazing. I think we have to be a little cautious about not getting Zoom fatigue, not requiring it for every single meeting all the time.
Yeah. And
allowing that there are times where it's not required, but my one-on-ones are always video. Anytime that I'm speaking, I use video. And as I said, increasingly so with our customers. I think it helps us to hire better talent from anywhere. And it does depend on the role. There's somewhere, if you're really doing focused managed services or customer support, or where there's a team-based training, when we do go back into the offices, there's some skills that are improved by being able to be together. And so some CSMs, even though they may not have been working as intimately on the details of the daily activities as those, for a CSM to be in that office and to have exposure to activity going on there, that can still be a good thing, right? For the CSM who likes to and can connect by being in the office. But
I can see that. I can see that. People say, well, I'm working more. I'm like, well, I don't know. I've been working at home for 7 years myself. I don't consider it working more, but you know what? I've been able to create a work-life balance that works within my personal schedule. it lowers my stress level when I can block out time in the morning to go to the gym, and I can schedule out time to take my daughter to school when she's in school and pick her up. When I'm able to schedule my work life around my personal life. And I found that to be very stress reducing.
Well, I think that that's been a very important part of it for me, and being able to create my own structure and a schedule that works for me and my family. But you said you have work-life balance, and I think it's very important to create those boundaries so that we can work from home successfully. And for people who've worked in offices until the pandemic forced them working from home, it's harder to create those rules. It's harder to turn off at the end of the day and not go back to your computer unless you have to, right? It's harder to define those boundaries. And not everybody has an office space where they can go and shut the door. And so some of those rules, you have to impose them on yourself because the structure doesn't do it. So for me, I love all the benefits that I get of being able to have, to have a more flexible schedule, even if it's something as simple as, like you're saying, taking your kid to school, or even greeting them or having lunch, with someone in your house and then going back to your space. As I said, to me, that's been huge. And I think the CSM role is a great one for that. I've had remote CSMs for, like I said, for 12 plus years on my teams. In fact, there was someone who, had always gone into an office, and then we went to working from home. And then he said, would it be okay if I moved? Thought about living somewhere that was outside of, close access to an office. But now that he can, he made a different personal choice for him, right? We're seeing this. We're seeing people, leave cities, choose to go move in other areas. And again, I think this is a career where we can often do that. And so I was like, you can live.
Yeah, exactly.
We do need to consider time constraints. I don't think it's something that makes sense to offshore to an entirely different time zone. And
100% agree. Yeah.
That sort of thing. But as far as where you live, if you're, similarly accessible to a customer, as you would be, you're still able to connect with those people who, you had been working with in the office.
You're able to move outside. I mean, this is what my family's going through. We're moving outside of a major metropolitan area. We're still close enough that I can get back here if I need to, but it's a slower pace of life, and it's a lower cost of living, and all of that reduces the stress, and that allows us to better take care. We need to be able to take care of ourselves, right? In order for all this stuff to work, we have to be able to take care of ourselves, and if we're taking care of ourselves, and we're in a better place, we're in a better state of mind, then we're going to take care of the people we care about, and we're going to be able to take care of our customers and our colleagues and everybody that we work with that much better.
I agree. And I think the difficulty over the past year has been, there's this assumption that everyone's calendar is fully available now, right? We're not traveling, you're not going anywhere, your kids probably aren't going to school, or if they are, you need to figure out how to just, how to manage that. So people tend to block more and more of their time. Oh, I can attend that meeting this evening because I'm not out, right? I'm home anyway. It's that sort of idea, which if that timing makes sense, and at my company, we do sometimes, right? You have to,
sometimes you got to do that
because it's global and people are everywhere, but it is okay to create the rule set and to work with your manager on what's fair to expect for you. One of my team members is on the West Coast, and she starts early in the day, and because that aligns with a lot of the timing, right? We have different offshore people and different people on the East Coast, and she's done her workday by 3 p.m, and that aligns with everybody else, and it works for her.
Yeah.
With her family. And that's wonderful. That's an awesome option that she has by being able to work remotely and not have to drive into the office. But I think it's a matter of understanding that, opening up that the times are different, but that it's okay too, and not expected that she's on all the time. Or
sometimes we put this with this pressure on ourselves, and we're the ones putting the pressure on ourselves. Nobody else is putting it on us. I had a student in one of my coaching cohorts last year, and she wasn't stepping away and eating lunch. And I said, you can't do that. You need to carve that time out. You need to, you have to commit to me that every day you carve an hour out, shut down your laptop, and go have lunch and listen to some music and go read or whatever. Right? The only person that's creating that stress is you. And there will be times, like you said, when things will pop up and we're going to have to jump on them. Right? But, and we have to deal with those because we're professionals. That's what we do. But don't put all that extra undue stress on yourself when you don't have to.
And we aren't good about keeping those commitments to ourselves.
Yes.
You'll learn tricks like, oh, block time on your calendar for work, but then you're like, yeah, that's just me, so it's okay. Yeah, you can schedule over that, right? So it's honoring those commitments to ourselves, which is important.
So true.
One other quick tip. So I was a big fan of James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits.
Okay.
This is, one of my book recommendations for the year. He talks about just making small change, which actually has a long-term impact. He, by the way, also has just a quick bit about personality traits, like your self-awareness, whatever model you use. Why wouldn't you think about it? So you can see how that would help you with certain ways of changing, thinking about your habits. But I think there's a lot to be said about just give yourself a break, take the time. I think you and I have talked before about, defining the time to exercise, which I was not good about doing before the pandemic, but that to me has been a big piece of, right, so that I can have, something. Of course, I hike here in Vermont. I get out in the morning before my workday begins.
Nice.
That's been a big help to me.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
How I can have the energy to, to dig into my workday.
And you get that fresh air, and when it's sunny out, you get some of that vitamin D. So important. So important. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me. Love this conversation. Love what you have to say. As usual, very, very enjoyable spending some time with you and talking to you about this. And I hope that we can get you on the program again. Stay safe and healthy. And I wish you the best. And also, you ever need anything from me, please let me know.
Right back at you, Andrew. And best of luck to you in the move.
Thank you.